Seed starting. Yippee! I can almost taste those fresh veggies. You only need a few things to get started if you want to start your own seeds and avoid the nursery. You need containers. And these are a number of containers that I found around my house. These are a 6-cell container. You usually see these at the nurseries. I save mine year from year. Wash them out before you use them again. As long as they have drainage holes in the bottom, you can use them. Your plants will also need a good quality seed starting mix. Now this mix is generally composed of peat moss, perlite, vermiculite. It's an inert substrate, meaning it doesn't really contain any nutrients in it. The seed gets all the nutrients it needs within its seed. Some have a little bit of compost mixture in it, and I suppose that's okay. You will also need a light source, and this is a grow light system that I have. It's on a stand, and then you can raise and lower the light to the height of the seedlings. An additional light source would be a shop light. These work very well for seedlings, and I've used this one for a number of years. A couple years ago, I bought some full spectrum LED lights, and these work also very well, but are not totally needed if all you have in your purchase power is a shop light. Also, don't forget your windowsills, although I don't really recommend a windowsill unless it gets a full strength southern exposure. In addition to a light source, you also need heat. Now my ambient temperature here is 71.6 degrees. I also have a what is called a heat mat that I put under my seedlings, under the trays or under the pots, and that keeps the temperature of the soil at about 75 to 85 degrees. And this helps immensely with the germination. So after you have those things, you also, you definitely need water. I keep a couple jugs of room temperature water. You don't want to use anything straight out of the tap, either cold or hot. In pop bottles, they have these cute little tops that will distribute water very nicely if you want to water your little baby seedlings. Whoops. I also use a pressure sprayer. This one is solely dedicated to spraying water. I don't use anything else in this but water-soluble fertilizers or just plain water for watering my seedlings. Also, don't forget you need labels for labeling your seeds. Once they get growing, you may not know what you have in that pot. Okay, so let's get started in growing some seeds. You want to pre-moisten your seed starter. If you put this in your containers to start your seeds just dry and then water it that way, the water is just going to roll off this soilless mix here. So I use some boiling water and pour it over it. I got this tip from Gary at the Rusted Garden, and he does this to kill fungus gnats eggs that have been laid in the soil mixture. Now all soil mixtures are not going to have this, but this is a good precaution. I had it one year, and these little eggs hatch, and they feed on the roots of your tiny little seedlings and will stunt their growth. You want just enough moisture for this to hold together, but not dripping wet. This is what I'm going to grow today. I'm going to grow some leeks, This is the package I had from last year. There's like 400 seeds in here. So this is going to last me at least another year too. Some red onions and some yellow sweet onions. And how I grow my onions is I grow them in a large flat like this. This is a 10 by 10 seed tray. It has holes in the bottom for drainage. This will get placed into another large container like this. So when I do water, the water won't sit in the bottom of this tray. It can go into the another tray on the bottom of it. Okay. There we go, right up to the top. I'm going to press down semi-firmly. I don't want to compact it too much. When I grow my onions, when they get big enough, they aren't going to get transplanted into another pot so they grow some more. Root vegetables don't take too well to transplanting, except for onions and leeks. They don't toot too bad, but they're going to go in here. And once they get about 4 inches tall, I will cut them back and keep them cut back to about, about 3 inches until it comes time for me to plant them out in the garden, which will be on about the middle of March. Now I'm going to plant the 3 varieties in this one tray. So that I don't get everything mixed up, I made some dividers. This is just styrofoam from a leftover takeout tray. I think just push that down into the soil. And when it comes time for transplanting, you take the whole, you scoop it out. Actually, it'll be pretty much of a mat, but you can take it out and you can tease the roots apart and then place them individually in your garden in your prepared soil. So I'm going to, let me see. This will be for leeks. I don't need too many leeks this year. And this will probably be for the yellow, and this will be for the red. But I will mark that. So here are the leeks. Not the smallest seeds, but they're tiny little pepper seeds. So sprinkle them over the surface. You can be quite generous. It's hard to see them because they are dark black. And they're supposed to be planted to a depth of about, let's say, 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, about 1/4 of an inch. So I think maybe I'll sprinkle a few more on there. Make sure to get the corners. Okay. So instead of covering them up with more soil, I'm just going to let them set on the top. And when I water them, it's at that time some of them will start falling into the soil, and they will then become at the right depth. So here are my red onions. I love the packs that they have a sticky on the side there, and you can reseal them. Now, it really helps. I like when you don't have to rip it off, and oftentimes you rip off some very important information. Okay, so the red ones, they look quite a bit like the leeks also. This will be a good amount of red onions. I hope I have space in my garden. Okay, here we have our yellow sweet Spanish. Now you can see how they all look the same when you go to plant them. And when they start coming up, they're all going to be little blades of grassy looking seedlings. So it is most important to label these. Okay. Now, except for this initial time, I mostly do bottom watering. So I put the water in the bottom of the drip tray and let by capillary action through the soil, wet the soil on up to the top. But only when I first start these seeds am I going to water from the top. I use a pump sprayer that I only dedicate solely to water. The water I use is room temperature water. I have my well water pump that's right down here, and I fill up a bunch of jugs and I let that set for a while. And I've got a kind of a wonky sprayer here. It's not, oops, not that one either. There we go, that's better. There we go, water it in very well. There we go. Okay. What I use for labeling, some old Venetian blinds. They seem to do the trick. I'll label inside and I'll cut off small portions, and we're going to put leeks on this one, and then we're going to put red on this one. In here, and then sweet onions here. There we go. Now, when I take them out to my garden, then I'll take the huge strip of the Venetian blind and write on it, and then put it next to whatever I grow. These little things seem to get lost in the garden. You got popsicle sticks, those are good, but they kind of get covered up after a while. Now I'm going to put a plastic dome over these. It's going to help keep the humidity in and promote germination. And these are microgreens that I seeded yesterday, and nothing has sprouted yet, but I'm covering them with a black top to kind of replicate being in the ground. And then this tray goes inside this tray. There we go. It's on a heat mat right here to promote germination. And then this will stay here. Oftentimes you can cover this up to promote a little darkness. There you go. I have a black piece of fabric that usually does fairly well. And once you start seeing sprouts, then you can take off your dark covering, and it can go up and down. Once it starts the germination, then you want to bring this down to about 3 inches above your plants. But right now, not necessary, not yet. So those are my first seeds outside of microgreens and some barley that I sprouted for my chickens. This is my first start to the 2021 gardening season.